All right. Welcome, everyone, to Isolation Break number 4. I'm Ravi Shankar. This is a collaborative endeavor between the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and the New York Writers Workshop. And you've noticed over the last few months, we've been bringing you the best international writers from the Asia Pacific region and beyond. This series is open to all APWT members, and we can talk a little bit more about the organization as we go forward. But I'm very excited about the lineup of readers that we have today, and each of them have books that they can talk about, and we will have some time for Q&A at the end. So definitely, if you're following us on Facebook or Twitter, send any comments or questions. The authors would be happy to answer them. And so we're gonna start today with terrific poet, a relocated New York poet who's living in Washington, D.C. Sarah Cahill Marin is the author of Reasons for Long Tomb, which just came out with Broadstone Books 2018, and 2 forthcoming collections, Nothing You Build Here Belongs, Nothing You Build Here Belongs Here, and Call Me Specs, and is the associate editor of the Beltway Poetry Quarterly, and her work has been published widely in many literary magazines and journals, including the Newtown Literary Review, the South Florida Poetry Review, Golden Walkman, and many others. And you can follow her at sarahcahillmarin.com. So, welcome, Sarah. So great to have you.
Thanks, Ravi. It's good to be here, and good morning, afternoon, everyone. I know we're all in different time zones, so it's nice to be together on this format. I am going to start by reading a poem from my book that came out in 2018, and I will give this information to Ravi. He mentioned it. It came out through Broadstone Books, and this poem will also be in my new collection coming out from Kelsey Books next year. It's called Some Will Die. This poem is timely. It was written back in 2016, but based on the pandemic, I wanted to start off with it. Some will die. Riverside Drive Park, dark Hudson water, imagined as blue as the pen swirling, Ayn Rand to pixels, making maps, making sense that you can read now, decipher. Hold hands, eyes darting 4 at a time, backwards to check the crosswalk and catching an empty sculpture, the Invisible Man, Harlem's bronze body, outlining trees, wet like lashes, blinking back little star twinkles, mimetics from the George Washington Bridge, as specific as the day the lady died, always remembering, over lunch and coffee, alone. If the worst we have to worry about is airborne calamity, sarin, or Ebola, then how to take the next inspiration of breath? Chemical thoroughfare is barely affordable, atrocious anomaly, yet bring them all here. Broken systems, beautiful ruins gleaming with interferon and slick black suitcases, swindled by the Swifty, suits claiming to carry booze in black bags to put home in the fridge. Lock away the riches. Don't be charitable. Competition sharpens, helps bolsters. How much must you teach a starving man to fish? Some will die. I'm going to go straight to another poem that's coming out from this collection. It's called Boricua. This is published by Kelsey Books next year. And this came out several years ago. And Boricua. What do you like to do? Set off bombs 20 or 25 years ago. A woman asked me as much when I told her goodbye. All the days before that were good ones, according to my memory. But she walked off looking for America, and we never talked again. What good is closure? A loaded word, I wonder. Also, since the pandemic began back in March, I was really moved and inspired to write. I was writing every single day. I've slowed down a bit. And some of these poems that I'm going to read next are from that period of fruitful writing, again, coming out in this next book in May. I did a couple of poems that I'm calling echo poems that are written on the bones of some authors that I had returned to during this time. This one is on the poem On Being Asked for a War Poem by William Butler Yeats. The title is On Being Asked for COVID Poems. In times like these, it's best to stay at home. A masked poet, quiet as the mourners, for as the world attempts to hide her face, we yearn for the freedom to touch, kiss, roam. Nothing left to do but follow orders, bound to the virus, denying embrace. And I'm going to change up the theme here a little bit and read from the manuscript that's going to come out after my chapbook to finish off my turn here. The book that I have coming out after my chapbook is called Call Me Spess, and the narrator for that book is the device, your iOS software device, and over the course of the book, the device becomes, it falls in love with the user. Each poem is based on a location, sort of like your location tracking, and it overhears people, so there's a variety of voices, similar to the Spoon River anthology Edgar Lee Masters book, if anyone's familiar with that work. And I'm going to read from the point of the device's voice. So this is one. Dear user, Corning spawned my glass face, liquid hot, yearning from molted fires for your touch before I knew you. Unsoiled by human hands, deeply glassed and bathed in salts, exchanging ions, flaming cool of touch, deep degrees with birthed Edison's mother bulb, 400 degrees. A fire let the legs lounge out in first steps, light colors switch. Crystal displays cathode pictures, tubes, shirking shine, overflowing their isopipe trouse, drawn down in flat, unbreakable sheets, calm and reflective. These waters, face cool and flawless now. You hold me, a mirror. Love, iOS 12.4. And to finish, one more. This is from the end of that book. The last chapter is called Glassifying, process of making the screen on a phone, which is made of glass. Dearest, sharp light sustained cracks, telling, sparks glory becoming as light strikes flawed baby tongues. What is us? I know, fix my eyes toward that eternal sojourn love mirrored in my glass. Your hands mold me, conceived human form. It seemed, as painted now in those same hues, glass fractured, refracting, splintered to touch. Darling, don't hurt another moment for me. I've willed myself to see, to fit into what was not there. But mine were wings that could not rise to that. My desire now is nothing more than to reflect you, your face, from this flickering screen. Unlock using Face ID from our union, all powers of the Almighty. Our Lady, love, banishes the wasteland, germinating rose garden queen, droplets of water bead on my face, a rosary, I pray for you. With every transmission, love, Spess. I'll wrap it up with that. Those two books that I read from are forthcoming. This Reasons for the Long Tomb is available now, and leave my website with Ravi to post.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was terrific. And we'll have some time afterwards, as I mentioned. Be interesting to hear about everyone listening about your process of kind of combinatory language. I think that'd be very interesting. So thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks.
Okay. So next up, and those of you who are just joining us, welcome to ISO Break number 4. Collab between the Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and the New York Writers Workshop. Very briefly, if you want to find out about either organization, you should look them up online, apwriters.org. I found it's kind of like an Asian AWP, but there's a sense of community and diversity there that is quite distinctive, I think. And so I'll talk a little bit as we go about some of the projects that are happening. And we are very lucky to have, and this reading is representative, readers ranging from LA to Malaysia to the UK today. And so the timing was really difficult to make it all work. And thankfully, Danton was willing to, he told me he's a night owl anyway. He stays up to work on his writing. So he's coming to us from Malaysia, and it's late at night for him. So thank you so much, Danton. And Danton Remoto's novel River Run has just been published by Penguin Random House Southeast Asia. It was chosen by Book Riot as one of the 5 most anticipated books by an Asian author for 2020. Danton has degrees from Anton de Manila University and University of Stirling, and he also studied the Graduate School of English at Rutgers on a Fulbright. He has worked as a publishing director, head of communications, a radio and television talk show host, and professor of literature at universities in the US, Philippines, and Malaysia. And most recently, he was head of school at the University of Nottingham in Malaysia. And it's very exciting to have you, particularly because this book was just re-released. So welcome. So glad to have
I don't even have a copy of the book yet. I'm going to read a short chapter, and I hope my Wi-Fi doesn't die on me. Dreadful Sunday afternoon. It was a dreadful Sunday afternoon, the kind of afternoon that people would possibly go in. The sun itself seemed to have taken the heat inside the rays of heat surfacing
Sorry, Danton. I think
and
we're having. Oh, sorry to interrupt. I think we're having a little trouble with your audio.
yeah, my Wi-Fi is not so good. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, that was better. It was clearer, but when you were reading, it was really kind of cutting out. So.
Oh, I repeat.
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is a very short chapter from my novel published last week. Don't have a copy yet. A dreadful Sunday afternoon. It was a dreadful Sunday afternoon, the kind of afternoon when the sun would be impossible because the rays of heat would be buried inside my skin. And so I would run out into the backyard, looking at the play of shadow and light on the leaves of the trees. Then I would climb the tree heavy with globes of small red fruit and listen to my aunts talking. From that height, I could eavesdrop on the chatter of people without being found out. That day, my mother's spinster sisters, Auntie Bella and Auntie Armida, were having a snack of rice cake fresh from Albay. Raising their heads and looking around ever so subtly, noticing there was nobody around, the 2 sisters began their stories. Our Lady of Good Voyage in Antipolo, the Blessed Virgin Mary, is more powerful than your Lady, than your Blessed Virgin in Baclaran, Auntie Armida began. Oh, that may be true, said Auntie Belia, but tell me, how can you hear Mass in Baclaran when around you would be the squealing of pigs being butchered for the roast lechon, the roast pig? Auntie Armida, who loved to spin a tale, would answer, Belia, have you heard the story of the 2 young lovers in Baclaran Church? No? Well, then listen up. A pair of teenagers would tell their parents they would hear Mass at the church on a Sunday afternoon like this. But really, well, they would just go to a hotel across the church and do it there. They would have sex in front of the church, while all along the pigs squealed and the priest intoned the sursum chord, the blessing everyone, in an accent that nobody understood. These young people, Mother of God, are such animals. Oh, they are, Armida, they are. Anyway, these teenagers told this lie for 3 consecutive Sunday afternoons. But on the 4th Sunday, something happened. What happened? Said Auntie Belia, and I know her fork must have been frozen in mid-air between the plate and her mouth. On the 4th Sunday afternoon, in the fever of their love-making, her vaginal muscles just suddenly locked. He couldn't withdraw much as he'd like to because she was squeezing him so tightly. And the pigs squealed for their lives, and the priest raised his golden ciborium. And the 2 young lovers, God did not bless them, good for them, or they were beginning to turn pale. And then what happened? Said Auntie Belia. And then she began to scream and scream and scream. And so the room boy ran to the room and opened it. And then he found the couple indeed joined to each other. The room boy gasped, ran down the stairs, and fetched the doctor who lived down the block. Oh, thank God the doctor was there. Well, it turned out the doctor was a born again Christian. He was scandalized the moment he pushed the door of the motel room. After raining down a mountain of curses on the couple, completely naked, he injected the muscle relaxant on her. And then the doctor continued giving them the sermon of his life. Jesus, Mary, Joseph, in Catholic conservative Philippines, having sex in front of a church, doing this in the heat of a Sunday afternoon. The young couple was almost dying from shame because the medicine was taking so long to take effect. And they were really very, very sore. But when the medicine did take effect, he quickly withdrew and put on his clothes as fast as he could. She also covered herself modestly with a white towel, grabbed her clothes very demure, proper and prim, said thanks to the doctor, and then walked to the bathroom. When she came out, she looked like the Virgin Mary, wearing a white dress that was cut way down her knees and a blue sash wound around her waist. The doctor told them the best and wisest thing would be to go to church that afternoon, confess their sins, and to attend the mass they missed. And so, ushered by the doctor on one side and by the room boy on another, our young couple finally went to the mass that they have missed for the last 3 Sundays. After hearing this tale told by my aunts, I just bit into the red fruit I was eating. Its small, white, and moist seeds lay scattered on my palm. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Danton. And would you please let us all know, this book was just released in Southeast Asia. Where can other readers find it?
Deep in Southeast Asia is in Singapore. It only began publishing like a year ago. So they publish writers either in Southeast Asia or people who live in Southeast Asia. So it's a 2-year-old publishing arm of Penguin.
Wonderful. Well, thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
I'm so glad that you're able to stay up, and hopefully you'll stay a little longer and we can talk to you more about the
Yeah,
book.
thank you.
Okay. And next up, it's my great pleasure to introduce a good friend and someone that I've worked with closely. I seem to be freezing a little bit here. Peter Kahn, who we're very lucky to have because he just has a new book that has come out. I'm sure he'll talk about it, Little Kings. But he's a high school teacher at Oak Park, River Forest High School since 1994 and a founding member of the London poetry collective Malika's Kitchen. He's twice been a commended poet in the Poetry Society's National Poetry Competition, a co-founder of the London Teenage Poetry Slam, and also founded Spoken Word Education. He holds an MA from English from Ohio State and an MFA from Fairfield, and recently was named runner-up in the 2019 NCTE and Penguin Random House Maya Angelou Teacher Award for Poetry. And Peter and I, along with Patricia Smith, worked on a great book of Golden Shovels dedicated to Gwendolyn Brooks and that poetic form invented by Terrence Hayes. So I'm very happy to have my friend and colleague Peter Kahn here. Peter, please take it away. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good to see you. I'm going to read 4 poems from this book, Little Kings, that came out in June with Nine Arches Press in the UK. So the first poem I'm going to read is called The Surprise of It, and it's set in 1980. And for those who don't know, there was something that was called the Miracle on Ice when the U.S. hockey team defeated the then Soviet Union's hockey team in the Winter Olympics. So this is the surprise of it. The sun, that tricky polished coin, plays a game with Mom's eyes as she edges us onto Riverside Drive for the 10,000th time. A woman in a car I don't remember slap shots our Chevy till it's a crumpled shell. Can you feel the skid and scud of it? The punch and thud of it? Can you hear the whir of ambulance and its zooming halt? See Mom's thumbs up as she stretchered in? In the end, only our once white station wagon has any permanent injuries. If airbags had existed, their deflated corpses would have testified to the crash. Our car looked like a discarded candy wrapper, but I walked up the hill with not even a limp. You wouldn't think it possible. Our neighbor, Mrs. Durant, who heard the bash and bang, even with the buffer of storm window, chaperoned me to my house. All we could think to do was turn on the TV to distract me from the rewind and replay of my brain. We watched the Soviets take a puck to the teeth and America win the gold. If you read the sports section that morning, you knew it was impossible, but we saw with our own eyes. For a couple of hours, I forgot about Mom, which too seems impossible. When the match ended and the crowd stormed the ice, I slobbered onto Mrs. Durant's fluffy sweater at the odds of it, the surprise of it, the accident of it. So, as Ravi said, I've been a teacher since 1994. I've been working with young people since 1990, so a long time. And one of the things, having worked in Chicago and in London primarily, is the prevalence and the importance of standardized tests in spite of their clear cultural biases. So I wrote a Golden Shovel poem where the last word of each line is a line that I borrowed from a Jim James song. So the borrowed line is smoking from shooting at nothing here. So it's a short poem called Shooting at Nothing Here. How's a test aimed to measure our teaching when a kid's smoking pot every battered morning before school to muzzle himself from bubbling a number 2 pencil into his dad's cross eye? From shooting a smudged fuck you from the ridged barrel of his throat? Look at it through the days of his red-marked pupils. Nothing in a test booklet musters an answer to fasten his focus here. So, and just another pitch in terms of golden shovels. So the Golden Shovel form was created by Terrence Hayes, inspired by Gwendolyn Brooks, and Ravi and I, along with Patricia Smith, created this anthology. Terrence has a forward in it. It's an amazing book. Sholay is in it as well. So the next poem is in loving memory of my Uncle Al, who passed away on April 3rd. It's called All I Hear is Kaddish. My uncle is squeezing a dog's chew toy, squeaking the peep out of it as we walk in. My parents and me to this home that is not where my cousins grew up, but where elders grow down. My uncle is standing, his head yanked by gravity like he's looking for a dropped key or a secret exit or a buried treasure. A cantor, Uncle Al married my parents. He married my cousins, married my sister, married my best friend, and hundreds of others. He would have married me if I got that far. I choose to join my parents for this visit to the Alzheimer's home instead of catching a matinee or reading in Central Park or doing shots of rum to celebrate spring break. Anything to avoid seeing the not him of him. But I'm here, and Uncle Al sobs at the sight of us. My mom shakes at his sobbing. I want him to sing like he used to, making Caesar howl or me giggle, but all I hear is a Kaddish for what's gone and the funeral that will come. How does it come to this? A brain sponging memory away like slop. After he stops crying and hits, he must know who we are. We're still in there. But an hour later, as the aide reads Treasure Island aloud, my uncle is a 4-year-old. Like my uncle is a 4-year-old. I'm ready to leave this sinking ship of a place. 15 men in the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil has done for the rest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. Uncle Al parrots back, I love you, as we back away. It's hard to know how to feel. It's like coming home to piss and shit and the wagging tail of the dog you dreamed had run away. So I'm going to switch up the tone a bit for this last poem, but I want to thank Ravi again and the APWT, my fellow readers. It's good to meet you and hear you. And the amazing Jane Kamain and Angela Hicken at Nine Arches Press. And then finally, my biggest supporters, my parents who are watching from Columbus, Ohio, home of the Buckeyes. So this last poem I'm actually using, I've started teaching again. We're doing it remotely. And we're talking about unsung heroes and anti-heroes. So unsung heroes, we're using a poem called Grace from this amazing book by my friend Roger Robinson, which won the T.S. Eliot Prize, A Portable Paradise. And for anti-heroes, I'm using this poem called Dear Mrs. Geyer. So in second grade, which is when you're about 8 years old, we had an extremely strict teacher named Mrs. Geyer, and we would always sit up straight. We'd never play around when she was around. She was never absent until this one fateful day in June of second grade, towards the end of the year. So this is called Dear Mrs. Geyer. If you hadn't been absent that day, Mrs. Geyer, I would have turned out differently. With your steel wire peppered hair, your curdled milk skin, your steely stare, you'd never have taken us outside in such heat. Never sat us in a circle on green grass peppered with pissy dandelion dots. Asked if we had news to share like that hippie sub. Andy Tuzio, then best friend and confidant, would have never dared to say, Peter doesn't want school to end. He won't be able to see Jill. He likes her. I wouldn't have seen Jill's face bloom into a stop sign, eyes darting down, buried with my 8-year-old ego. Wouldn't have heard laughter bombard me like red rubber balls in gym. If you weren't absent that sunny day, Mrs. Geyer, confidence wouldn't have stunted like a plastic stump. Asking Megan Mott to senior prom 9 years later wouldn't have sent me to the emergency room, nose bleeding out, turning white tissue to gloppy sludge. Were you truly sick that day, Mrs. Geyer? I really hope so. And two quick coincidences. One, Andy Tuzio reached out to me on LinkedIn last month for the first time in over 40 years that I'd heard from him. And my 9-year-old nephew's 4th grade teacher happens to be Megan Mott's younger sister. Anyway, thanks a lot. And I look forward to hearing the next couple of readers.
Okay, thank you, Peter. That's great. And would you, again, remind people where the Nine Arches Press is based in the UK? Where, if American readers want a copy of Little Kings, how can they get a hold of it?
So basically, if you Google Little Kings, Peter Kahn, and Nine Arches, you'll get a link. And I think I sent you it to put in the chat as well.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Peter. And we'll have some time afterwards to chat with everyone. So those of you who are just joining us, this is Isolation Break number 4, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop collaboration. The Asia Pacific Writers and Translators has a few projects coming up. I want you to keep your eyes open for Meridian, which is an anthology of new writing co-published with Drunken Boat. And the Bangalore Review is doing a special edition of APWT writers forthcoming in December. And so there are all of these kinds of publishing endeavors and ways in which the writers of the organization are trying to help one another. And that sense of community, I think, is so important. So I am very excited now to have someone I respect and admire very much, Kyoko Yoshida, who was born and raised in Munakata, and her first collection of short stories came out in 2014, Disorientalism, with Vagabond Press in Sydney, where I have been doing work, and that's when I encountered her work. And it is really a wonderful hybrid work that has travelogues, animal fables, and nightmare narratives. And along with Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Forrest Gander, she translated Kaiwa Nomura's Spectacle and Pigsty, which won the 2012 Best Translated Book of Poetry in the U.S., as well as the Toson Memorial Retkai Award in Japan. So she's translated and written a number of books, and I hope that Kyoko will tell us about her most recent projects. And she's coming to us, I mentioned the kind of global span of her readership, or of the writers tonight. Kyoko is coming to us from the UK. So we're so happy to have you. Welcome, Kyoko.
Thank you. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, APWT and New York Writers Workshop for organizing this. So I've been in UK. This is really the last week of my stay, 1 year stay in the UK. This is my sabbatical, and among many projects I had, one of the things I've been working on is this series of stories about dogs and miracle. And I'd like to share one of the first stories, that I wrote about dog and miracle. And this is, the story is anthologized in Books Actually's Gold Standard 2016, edited by Julie Ko. She's an Australian writer. And the book is from Singapore. And I'm really proud to be the first story to be published in this inaugural annual anthology. Okay, but I'm not reading the entire story. I'll be reading part of a story titled In Defense of Literature, or The Miracle of Saint Roch. And this story is dedicated to Lithuanian poet Sigitas Parulskis, and I'll be reading story inside this story titled The Saint of Mount Rokko. And Mount Rokko is a little mountain in the north of Kobe City in Japan. Okay, here we go. Once in my time, there was a woman and a man. The man appeared in the shape of a cream-colored dog, though in fact he was a human male. We don't know the reason. Perhaps he was a divine agent, or perhaps there was an accident in the cycle of reincarnation. Whether the woman was aware that the dog was in fact a man, I have no way of knowing. She was a divorcee in her 40s. To her girlfriends, she spoke of giving up on men, but what she actually felt about men and her relationship to them is beyond supposition. The woman noticed that the bread in their house was running out more quickly than usual. She bought more bread, but it too disappeared quickly. So she decided to keep vigil. She didn't need to stay up all night because early in the evening, the dog showed up in the pantry and mouthed the bun and pussyfooted out of the house. She was right by his side all the while, but the dog seemed not to care as he passed her by. The dog trotted down the main street of the village, holding in his jaws a cream-colored bun half the size of his head. The woman followed the dog. Villagers offered greetings to the dog, and the dog bobbed his head as if acknowledging people's goodwill. But these same villagers who would greet the woman during the day would not say good evening to her now. She had become invisible to them. The dog trotted into the park in the middle of the forest. A man sat there on the bench. He had a cane. His left thigh was severely injured. The woman could tell because he had a pajama shirt on without the pajama pants. She was watching from behind a tall camphor tree. The dog mindfully minced up to the man and dropped the cream bun half the size of his head on the man's lap. The woman noticed there was a heap of bread in front of the bench. The man patted the dog's round cream-colored head. The dog turned and left. The woman wanted to follow the dog, but she couldn't move. She stood behind the camphor tree, mesmerized. Soon, a red dog appeared from the forest and mindfully approached the man. The red dog had a dinner roll in his mouth. He dropped the roll on the man's lap and departed. Soon, a gray dog appeared and followed the others' examples. The man with the cane took a bite of the cream-colored bun and chewed it. He dropped the remains of the bun on the heap at his feet. He then grabbed the dinner roll and ate some of it. As he chewed, dogs kept coming with their offerings. These dogs were in fact all human males in canine shapes. Again, how do I know why they had turned into dogs? Whether the man with the cane was aware of the true identity of the dogs, I do not know, and neither do you. As the man chewed on, the woman saw that his thigh injury was healing quickly. Time was rewinding fast in front of her. She felt dizzy. I am witnessing a miracle, she told herself. This man must be a saint. When the scar healed over completely, the man stood up, and the cane fell to the ground by the heap of half-eaten buns. Barefooted, the man headed into the forest, and the woman followed him without thinking. The man entered the hut, his dwelling. Through a window, she peered into the house to witness the further development of the miracle. The man sat on the sofa and watched TV. From the angle she was at, she couldn't tell what he was watching, but from the green reflection playing across his face, she guessed it was a football game. As night fell into the forest, the green reflection in his face deepened. The woman became afraid of the darkness and turned and headed home. She was mildly disappointed that no further miraculous events had taken place. She hadn't noticed tears streaming down the man's cheeks. She didn't stay long enough to witness the man's masturbating. When he was finished, he fell asleep on the sofa. The TV stayed on. When the woman came home, the door was wide open. She was frightened as she set foot in the house. She cried out, "Hello, is someone there?" There was no answer, but when she entered the pantry behind the kitchen, she encountered a human male, naked but for a pajama shirt that barely hid his testicles. Of course, this was the man who had lived with her for so long in the shape of a cream-colored dog, a fact which, as I said before, she might or might not have known. The woman's knees crooked in a funny way. Her arms flew limply forward, and with a thump, she slumped to the floor as if prostrating herself. We do not know if she collapsed because of overwhelming joy, extreme surprise, grave disappointment, or heavy anxiety that for next months and years she would live with a human male, because in fact she had been honest when she told her girlfriends that she had given up on men, or none of the above. We do know, however, that she will open her eyes sooner or later and will have to face what she has to face. The end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyoko. It was wonderful, and we will have a discussion afterwards. I'm hoping, I know that you also translated Dave Eggers into Japanese, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of what we have a couple of wonderful translators among us today, and it is so. Thank you so much. Do you have a new project out, Kyoko?
Yeah. So this is part of the new project that the series of stories about dogs. But also, I'm been working on this novel about the Negro baseball team coming to Japan in 1920s.
Wow. Oh, that's fascinating. Oh, thank you so much. And welcome those of you who are just joining us. Again, this is Isolation Break number 4, APWT and New York Writers Workshop co-production. The New York Writers Workshop does online and in-person writing workshops. I guess in this moment, it's been primarily online around the world. And you can find out more information by Googling New York Writers Workshop. And there are some really award-winning professors who give exceptional value, I think, to any interested writers. And a number of the writers have gone on to publish So it's again a terrific organization to be part of, and it is my absolute pleasure to have our final reader who is with us, for whom it's very early in the morning. We have Danton, for whom it was nearly midnight. For Cholet, it is 8 in the morning or something, and this is Cholet Wolpe is an Iranian-born poet, writer, and literary translator, and she's the recipient of the 2014 PEN/HEIM 2013 Midwest Book Award and the 2010 Louis Roth Persian Translation Prize. She is really multi-talented. She is a poet and a dramatist. Her plays have been finalists and semi-finalists at many festivals, the Bay Area Playwrights Festival, the Eugene O'Neill National Playwrights Conference, and her literary work includes 5 collections of poetry, several plays, 3 books of translation, and 3 anthologies. And we were talking about translation. Her wonderful translations of Attar, The Conference of the Birds, just came out recently with W.W. Norton. And she has performed her work around the world, the Singapore Literary Festival, Los Angeles Out Loud, on the Broad Stage, and also taught at UCLA, where she was the inaugural writer in residence in 2018, as well as University of Maine Stone Coast MFA program. And she has lived and traveled everywhere, including Iran, Trinidad, and the UK, although we're catching up with her in Los Angeles, where she lives with her husband, the sociologist Edward Tellis. So welcome, Cholet. So happy to see you.
It's good to see you. I hope this isolation break will turn into, yay, we're out there break. Anyway, it's good to be here. For me, it's very early in the morning, but good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am going to, I was thinking about what to read. I've been doing some readings online recently, and I've been reading from books, but today, I think I want to read something new from a new manuscript, and the piece was a little bit long, so I've edited it down for you. And it's a poem called "This Coffin," and the poem is structured in different sections, and it has poetic prose and then poetry with it. So I think you'll be able to pick it up as I read it. This coffin. I lie on my old spring bed thinking about girls who slit their wrists, who pour kerosene on their heads and light a match. I'll be 13 soon. We kiss the warm earth, lips drawing moans from the sea. Fountains of semen like ghosts in flimsy shrouds recreate us, sinew by shadow, by flesh. And this coffin, mine. Mother's cousin is soon to be married. She's visiting from her village, and they've installed her in my room. I ask about her fiancé, but she says I'm too young for that talk. Every night she shoves my doll into my arms and kisses me goodnight. Who does she know who takes comfort from sleeping with a stiff metal-made plastic body? If I tell her this, her eyelashes will blink away my words. I clutch the doll and say goodnight. My country stands behind a tree laden with fruit, yet hungry. Instead of seeds, it plants landmines in the fertile soil, arranges vowels along its windowsills like shells from an oil-ridden shore. As I contemplate opening my veins with mother's kitchen knife, I ask poster of Gugush, my pop rebellious idol, what's the point? Would my death cancel the wedding they're planning? Will it stop all jolly feasts in the family this year? Next year, will they sing at my funeral? Wear a red dress, will you? This city chokes in morning glory which grows along its tall windows over the tables and chairs of restaurants, through the crevices of brick walls in old libraries. At the border stations, they fill up our tanks with shoes that spawn nightmares. I carry my coffin on my back. I have perfected the art of eavesdropping. I hide behind furniture or crawl under mother's bed to listen to adults. Into the old-fashioned keyhole of my bedroom door, which luckily opens to the living room, I stick a long straw attached to a cardboard earpiece shaped like a trumpet where I rest my ear. At night, the adults bring out baklava and tea, huddle around the kerosene stove and talk. Now I hold my breath and listen, but they are not speaking about marriage. They are not laughing. Panic is like smoke enters through the keyhole. Who has been arrested? Fear rocks the cradle until the city falls silent. It licks the inky outlines of churches and temples from its lips, the shadows of unbelievers and infidels. Doors uproot themselves. Want some ash for your soup? A little for your lover's tea? I promise I will not haunt you. This is only to cure us of our names, country, heroes. In Trinidad, my aunt takes care of me. My grandmother cooks and gives plenty of advice. I get fat. I get lost. My skin isn't dark enough. It isn't white enough. My hair doesn't curl tight, nor does it drop straight like a waterfall. I wish I could iron my tongue, crease it sharp so I could belong. Refugees trail the narrow roads like sheep wandering edges of hallucination. They have no name and their throats are foggy with mournful songs. They are the dead who smell of bone ash. They carry their coffins on their backs and the bones in their eyes ache. Daddy sends me to an all-girls boarding school in England. My roommate has long blonde hair. She mocks the dark hair above my lips. I buy tweezers. Mother's cousins call, say the Postars came knocking on our door looking for her husband. He ran out the back door, thank God, but they would not leave empty-handed. They went next door and arrested our pregnant Baha'i neighbor. I want my Mattel doll back. I want it shoved into my arms. I promise not to eavesdrop. Women sing absence like opera. They sprinkle it on white sheets like perfume, graft it to trees like branches from homeland, indelible sacrifications on their lips. The dance is this late breeze, swings the hangman's rope. It is your cold fingers through my hair. Think of those left behind, he says, the young girls they just hanged for refusing to convert. A good religious girl, I'm on display under a bell jar. No boyfriends, no late parties, no drinking in the United States of America. All Daddy cares about is to protect my virginity. He guards it like his wallet. Don't wish for death. It may hear you and come dressed like a clown. Don't wear your scars like notes scribbled on the margins of books. Don't line your shoes along the cold wings of a plane about to take off. Fear slurps my living skin like a lynx. I walk with a coffin on my back. To escape daddy's rules, I get married. He is relieved. It's exhausting to protect a girl in a place like America. He holds his head between his palms when mom reminds him what we have lost. The losing never stops, not just things, family, neighbors, people we have known all our lives. Dr. So-and-so is now a dishwasher at a diner in DC. The engineer who built such and such a bridge lays tiles in rich people's homes in LA. My school principal and his wife, well, they just disappeared. Tonight, I lose the way to my next dream. Like a candle in a paper boat, Daddy offers me to the sea. I chant every prayer I know, but no mermaid takes pity and returns me to my childhood. My songs will not wake the moon's face, the house grass, snow, donkeys burdened with almonds. Instead, the sound of knives sharpens against darkness. Instead, my blouse aches for this cold, contagious absence. Lovers, they come and are ejected. The entertainer who steals, the hallucinating attorney, the trumpet player with medals and guns, the double-dealing psychologists. The sum of them is less than zero. There is nothing left to subtract. Every spring, the tree in the backyard regains its leaves, but the mockingbird returns with the same damn song in his beak. Every day, I stand in front of a firing squad, eyes tightly bound with a red kerchief. I think about my mortgage, the price of utilities, the color of your shoes. I stand in my puddle and worry about my burial expenses. They aim, but do not shoot. I dedicate this poem to the coffin on my back. Thank you.
So wonderful, Sholay. And I think we are all still soaking in the reverberations of that. Thank you so much for that. And I will add everyone here back to the stream. Oh, Danton? Okay. And actually, before I kind of introduce everyone, thank you all for the reading. I should say, Sholay, would you please tell us about your current projects? And I know that you have the translations of Attar out, but you have other stuff as well. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, I have things. You can go to my website. I have books, depends on what you like. But what I'm really most excited about right now is that I've written a libretto for a beautiful oratorio with composer Fahad Ziadat. And we are premiering it next year in LA. And we hope to tour it internationally. So you all out there in other countries, please contact me if you're ever interested, and I can send you a demo video. And the other thing I'm doing that I'm really excited about is I'm writing a original script for film for executive producers in Los Angeles. That's all. And of course, the poem that I read right now is part of a new collection of poetry that I'm just about to complete. That's all. Am I still online? Okay, there we go. I think we lost Robbie.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some technical issues clearly, but you can hear me, I hope. So thank you all. Yes, I'm gonna. There's an algorithm that freezes your face in the most unflattering of poses, and they're using it now. So that was really terrific. I want to thank everyone again. This was Isolation Break number 4, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop co-production. And I thought we maybe could start. There's such a variety of different work, and one of the through threads I found was this kind of linguistic hybridity that I felt like many of you are kind of playing around. Peter with the edges of narrative, Cholet with dramatic elements, and Kyoko, of course, in her work, and Sarah's doing this kind of almost operating system. Infusion in her lyrical language. And so I was fascinated by that. And I was wondering if you might speak to that idea of what linguistic hybridity means to you, or if you're thinking about that in any way. And anyone, feel free. We'll just have a natural conversation. Feel free, jump in anytime. We can take it in any direction. Kyoko, do you want to say something to this? Because I feel like your work is really kind of genre pushing and really kind of unclassifiable, which is something that I've always admired about it.
I don't know if she can hear you.
Sure.
I think maybe Kyoko is.
I'll stop.
Yes, you were kind of muted. Well, and anyone else can jump in. I mean, Sarah, do you want to talk about what you were doing with the language in your current project there?
Sure. Yeah, I became really fascinated with the natural language processing that computers are being taught to do. I mean, AI is just sort of happening around us, whether we like it or not. And so I started doing a little research about what that is, and there's been movies made about this, obviously, and it's not nothing new. But the poetry that I started writing about it was the narrator, and the narrator is learning how to speak based on what the carrier is experiencing in the world. So I was really interested linguistically, like what that would look like in poetry. And I remember, Ravi, like you did some poetry with emoticons, and I liked how you used the image to then jump off and write words based on that. So what these poems do is build a world based on what happens in this little box, right? Like I'm staring at a glass face that's also hearing me and viewing me, and there's operations happening based on binary blocks that turn images and feeds and create things. So I think poetry for me is, the words and the blank space. Cholet, you said something about absence, women seeking absence, and poetry for me is all about absence. And so the zeros and the ones that computers speak in is the basic bits building blocks. And so the book that I wrote starts there. And I went back and did this because it started in a very sort of contrived place, and I returned to the Divine Comedy to look for some structure. And so the book starts in sort of like a hell type space, and the speaker moves through different layers of like what the Inferno does, and becomes something, and like moves through a heaven. And I won't give away the ending, but there's sort of like a teacher figure that brings the voice into its own consciousness. And because when our iPhones are made, the way that glass is made, there's like a molten process that solidifies and things like that. I thought the Inferno was a nice parallel to build a spine of the book onto. So linguistically, that's where the poems come from. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what other people think about those kinds of concepts. I'm not hearing Robbie. I think you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I was saying, Shola, you've been doing a lot of work recently in film and theater. Of course, you have a long history as a poet and translator, but how is that kind of inflecting your work? Or have you thought about your work? I mean, clearly you're a wonderful performer in those dramatic terms from the very beginning, or is something new happening now?
No, I don't like to be cornered with my creativity. You know, I've never liked that. I remember many years ago, I was speaking to a good friend of mine who's a wonderful poet. And she was telling me, no, you have to stick to one thing. If you want to be a poet, that's what you need to be. And I just totally disagree with that. I think creativity is fluid. And the richer it becomes when you bring in different art forms and incorporate that into your work. And I think we're finding that actually in universities now, that they're encouraging multidisciplinary studies, you know, because that enriches your life. And I think it's the same with art. So yeah, and that's why I'm so excited about this new book that I'm putting together, because it is kind of like a memoir, poetry, prose, all of that together, and it's written in such a way that it can be performed. So it's exciting for me when I write like that.
Wonderful. And Peter, you want to jump in here? I mean, so many of your poems, and I think it's such a powerful evocation of childhood and school, and you're an educator, and I feel like that is a strand that runs through so much of your work, that kind of pedagogical and compassionate eye in some ways to everything you see. You want to talk a little bit about Little Kings and what you were thinking about in putting that book together?
Sure. So I've always enjoyed teaching novels. So Toni Morrison, I love teaching Sula, for instance, or plays like Fences by August Wilson. I never enjoyed teaching poetry. So I came to poetry more with how can I make this more interesting for students, because it's not interesting to me, and narrative pops out, right? So a good narrative poem. So Cholet's poem, like following that narrative, and you know, from Trinidad, England and stuff. For me, I'm able to follow that more than abstract poetry, right? So Little Kings, I wanted to put something together that reads like interconnected short stories that are poetic, because that's the kind of book that I would enjoy, and that I think my students would enjoy. So not to say that I don't enjoy other types of poetry at this juncture, but I always prefer a good story.
Right. And Kyoko, can you hear us now? I think Kyoko is having a little trouble with her audio. Are you able to hear the conversation, Kyoko? Oh, I think you're muted. Oh. I think you're still muted. I don't know why. I've tried to unmute you. Okay, and I think I'm moving in slow motion now. Well, I was hoping, Kyoko, that Kyokyo's audio could work, because I wanted to talk a little bit about translation. And I know Shole has translated from ancient Persian, and Kyoko does translation in both directions from the Japanese. And well, Shole, how has working with Attar kind of changed your life? I remember we spoke when you were in the process of birthing this book, and it was this kind of gestation, a creative gestation. And since it's come out, how do you feel like it's kind of impacted you?
Well, it's impacted me greatly. I first actually began translating modern poetry. I translated through Farrokhzad, which is an iconic feminist poet of the 20th century Iran, an icon. And then I moved on to the 12th century Iranian literature. The thing about Attar is that it is a monumental work that I undertook. And the reason it changed my life, it's because it is such an amazingly spiritual book, non-denominational. Doesn't matter what religion or what background you come from. But when you delve into that book, it just changes your soul. And that's just for the reader. Imagine for the person who's translating it, who's like delving into those deep. And it was just a beautiful. I dedicated 2-3 years of my life to it, and it's like one of the best things I've ever done in my life, because not only it helped me as a human being, but I feel that it's going to help many others in the years to come.
Yes, it's a beautiful book. And I think, and Attar, if you don't know, of course, was Rumi's teacher, right? And the wisdom contained there, I think you have brought it to life in such a marvelous way. So thank you for that, Sholay, on behalf of all of us. Really. Kyoko, the audio seems to be better. Do you want to hook in and talk about translation a little bit? Because I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Huh? Let me try to mute.
Yeah. So I translate both ways. So my academic background is American literature, contemporary fiction. So from English to Japanese, I translate fiction such as Dave Eggers, like you mentioned. But from Japanese to English, I translate contemporary experimental poetry or drama into English, often with co-translators. And one of the reasons I do that is because I write in my second language in English, in my native language environment in Japanese, and translating poetry, Japanese poetry into English is a kind of way to form my, the skills to how do you say, become more dexterous with poetic language in English. And I enjoyed it a lot. And recently, I just
Oh no, I think we lost Kyoko to the void. I was going to say, and I don't know if everyone knows, but as we are doing this, StreamYard actually has captions for our reading. And sometimes they're pretty accurate, but when Kyoko was reading, they were quite off, I thought, and kind of funny and poetic in a way. I wanted to share that with Kyoko. But Danton, maybe we can bring you into the conversation as well, because have you done any translation from Tagalog or anything else? Danton, are you able to hear me? Okay. One in the vortex, one's disappeared.
This is what happens when you try to do something global.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope maybe Danton will. Oh, Kyoko, you got cut off mid-thought. I don't know if you wanted to finish.
where was it cut? I don't even know where it was cut.
Oh, you were talking about translating experimental Japanese poetry into English.
Right. So Mimi Hachikai, I just finished manuscript, my translation manuscript of Mimi Hachikai, and she's still young but important new voice in Japanese contemporary poetry. So I'm really excited that I finished translating, and I'm hoping the book will come out in a year or two, and that'll be her first collection, in English translation.
Oh, wonderful! And do you have a working title for the book?
It's the right now it's titled "Some Water to Wash My Face."
Mm. All right. And I'm also just kind of curious. I wanted to check in with everyone on how you're doing, personally and collectively, right? And in this very odd pandemic moment, I mean, where are you finding solace, and how are you kind of keeping your hope alive when things seem to be a little bit bleak? Peter, what are you doing?
So going back to school. So we've been back in school for a couple of weeks, working remotely and doing Zoom and breakout rooms and the such. And, hearing students write poetry and seeing their resilience has definitely helped me out, as well as my 9-year-old nephew, who he just powers through all of this and has fun regardless.
Nice. Sarah, I know that your first poem was about being asked to write COVID poems, which of course I think all of us have had to attempt to do. But how about you? What are you doing?
I am actually, I'm in law school at night, so I've had the privilege to be back in school. My writing has taken a hit. I feel very dry. My inspiration feels dry, but Thoreau, I've returned to a lot of writers that I really love as a way to try and refill that well. And Thoreau has this essay that came out in the Atlantic, I think it was the Atlantic originally, on walking. And I had been walking a lot, and I translated that into something that I used to really love, which is running. And I've been running every single day for,
Wow.
I think I'm at 107 days now. Not a lot. It usually is just 1 mile, which is a 10-minute activity, but it's something that opens my brain and connects me to something bigger than myself. So maybe that'll turn into eventually. But
it might be a silver lining, and this reconnection to nature and to conservation. And I mean, I feel like, of course, something like this, what we're doing now, probably wouldn't be conceived of in a moment other than this, right? So there are some ways in which we're trying to make things work. Danton, is your audio working? No? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'm working next week in the Philippines, but I really don't want to be an administrator. The only jobs in the Philippines are running universities and colleges, so I don't know. I want to teach. I really like teaching so much.
And tell us, because we have such an international audience here. I mean, how are things on the ground in the Philippines in terms of the response to COVID, in terms of the government, Duarte? I mean, how are things there?
My Wi-Fi, I think, is not good.
That's one thing you can report in the field. Wi-Fi is not good. I know. This is unfortunate, but hopefully you will be able to hook back in. Yeah, it's really odd. Shole, are you teaching as well now, or are you done with your semester when you were writer in residence?
Well, I just actually began my job as writer in residence at UC California in Irvine. So I'm teaching. Robbie, I can't hear you.
I think I'm frozen. I think we're having like all kinds of technological glitches, which might indicate that we're nearing the end of our time together. But
yeah.
Maybe we could just end with giving some small word of what they. I mean, I feel like we're in this kind of pivotal transformational moment. And of course, we're well aware of what's happening politically. I think it's important that we get out there and vote and talk to people and have conversations. Is there anything that you just want to leave our audience with before we finish today, Sarah?
Yeah, I think use your technology as effectively as you can, I think, and vote. I recently signed up for updates about the new bills that our government is passing here in the United States, and I am keeping myself informed that way, as a poet and as a citizen, and I'm going to continue to walk and write, and I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's been wonderful to have all of you here. How about you, Peter? I mean, we've talked a little bit about your home state is Ohio, of course, and you've had some disagreements with how things have been done there. I mean, what is your kind of takeaway or wisdom you want to leave us with here?
I mean, it's scary times, particularly coming off the back end of the RNC convention. But as Sarah said, vote, make sure everybody you know votes, and try to read poetry and keep upbeat in these dark times. But this is hopeful, right? All of us being here together. So thanks again for doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a kind of wonderful, it's an afternoon for me and a great way to spend a Saturday. Kyoko, do you have anything that you would like to leave us with? I think that I'm getting, oh, yes, you, Kyoko.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, one of the things I've started to do after lockdown is to send a little booklet of poems, small poems, through mail. Hoping to, so that the people are kind of using technology now to communicate better. But I thought, that I would send out the real thing that you can take in your hands. And so that I've been doing this Poetry Dispatch. I just sent out the 4th issue. And now that, that the USPS was under attack, that I felt like sending poems using mail was almost like a political act.
Ah, I love that. And the materiality. I mean, when I so infrequently get handwritten letters, but I got one the other day, and it's kind of a wonderful reminder of, how things could be, but also there's a depth of correspondence that takes place in an epistolary form I think you don't get elsewhere. So that's wonderful. And that's called Poetry Dispatch, Kyoko? Can people sign up for it? Or, there we go. Back into the void. Sholay, how about you?
What I would like to leave everyone with is 12th century mystic poet Attar's beautiful line. And he says, listen, unity in diversity. I think this is something that we need to constantly put out there, because we are having this is a very, very divisive time in United States and the world. So it's not just one country. And I think as poets and writers, that's what we are promoting. Literature is a bridge that, connects cultures and people. So keep at it.
Yes, thank you, Sholay. And I love that, to end on that message of unity through diversity. And it does feel like we're at a moment where perhaps we can have significant institutional changes to make, the U.S. certainly a more democratic and civic-minded place. So I think keeping active, keeping hopeful, and reading and writing poetry and literature is really important in this moment. So with that, I want to thank all of our readers for a wonderful reading. You can check the APWT site as well for links to their books. Keep your ears open for Isolation Break number 5, which will be happening sometime in September, and Meridian, the Drunkenville APWT anthology of new writing, as well as the Bangalore Review issue. And of course, you can check out the classes and events at the New York Writers Workshop as well. So I want to thank everyone for being here and spending a little bit of time with us here. Whole reading will be archived, but it was so wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye, everyone.